Okay, so now that we have some of that business set up, let's start coding in some CSS. I'm going to open up the recipe. This is the one that's going to make it so that our original bare bones CSS designer design looks more like this one. So what I did is I clicked on the CSS recipe and this Word document comes out. And it's got all the stuff that you need. By the time that you see it, hopefully all the links will be ready, and more than likely they will be. It looks like a lot, and it's just a lot of these things are repeated because they're in different elements within the page, and I'll explain what that means as I go along. Ideally, you're responsible to make all the changes. I'm going to create enough videos to hopefully get you through halfway down this first page, and I hope that by then things will start to click and you'll be able to set up the CSS coding for yourself for the rest of them. So what does all this mean? I'm going to go and open up my Visual Studio Code. Here's my page. And here I can right click on index.html. I'm in a Macintosh, so it tells me that I can reveal in Finder. That is, it's going to show me in the system where it is. If you're in a PC, I think that you'll explore to the desktop or explore to the file location. Something like that. It's very similar. Now this index.html in this particular Mac is inside a folder called ITSC1401, that's the repository. Repos is the other folder. Files, desktop is just going backwards. So desktop files, repos, the repository in week 4, and then my index page is here. And I'm telling you this because once you figure out where it is that you saved your file, you can open up another browser window, and I'm opening up Google instead of Firefox, which is what I'm using the rest of the time. I can go to the File menu, File Open, or press Command O on a Mac, Control O on a PC, and then that'll give me the opportunity to go and find it. So I'm already here in the desktop files repos repository week 4, and I want to open up index.html. And there's the file that we're going to be working with. Assignment 2 is what it's called currently. It should be called something else. It should be called CSS-Designer, and I can make that first change here in my index.html. From assignment 2, I'll highlight that, call it CSS-Designer. And I want to say that the one on the picture has a hyphen, so CSS-Designer. And I'm going to save that, Command S, Control S on your PC, and if I go back to Chrome, because I opened it up in my desktop, I can reload it and I can see the changes that I'm making right away. Later on in the course, we're going to be using CodePen online, which will allow us to see the changes as they happen. So that being said, I'm done with this file for now, the index.html. There may be other changes later, but right now currently I just want to work with the styles.css. Currently we only have those 2 lines, which mean nothing other than they set up the character set to be Western font, and there's a little comment there that just says this is a CSS document, nothing much more. Now back to where I was in the lesson. At the very top of this assignment there is a link for the CSS recipe. I'm going to open that up. This is going to be my guide. And I think I've already mentioned that, or if I haven't, I'll repeat. I'm going to go through, there's about 3 pages worth of changes, and don't be scared. That seems like a lot. It's not really a lot. A lot of these are repeated. Most of these, by the way, whenever you see their links, they're blue underlined. If you click on them, they'll take you to the W3 pages with more information on what they mean. And I think that if I show you the first 3 or 4 things on videos, you can figure out the rest without any problems. So the first thing we got to do is set the font family to Georgia and serif. I'm going to click on font family and see what it is that this means. CSS font family property, it just specifies the font for your CSS. The font family property specifies the font for an element. Our element is the body element, by the way. So inside of the CSS file, I'm going to type in the word body. And I don't know if you notice that as you start to type in B-O-D-Y, you get a sort of a self-finishing here, not self-correcting, but it will finish it for yourself because it recognizes that this is a valid word, a valid element. Then, after typing in the word body, I'm going to open up a bracket, a left curly bracket, and it puts the second one in for me so that I can just press return, and I will be in the middle of body and the brackets. So that being said, I'm going back and seeing what this is then. Properly, this specifies the font for an element, and in our recipe we said that we want to change the font family to Georgia, serif. In the property, it shows you that it could be something like Times New Roman. This is in quotations because the name of the font includes spaces. The secondary name is Times, and the last one is serif. There is a family of fonts called Times New Roman that is sort of modern and every system has access to. There's an older version of this called Times, and then there's serif, which is just a very generic way of saying I want something with feet in them, on them, and this is just the type of font that it is. It's a serif font. So what I want you to do and take into consideration every time that you see what these properties look like is that they're already typed out for us. If you notice, the elements that they're using here are P and A, and then these are paragraphs and links. So every paragraph and every link will have a font family at Times New Roman. We're not working with paragraphs and links, we're working with the body. However, the font family is going to be the same format. I'm going to copy by highlighting font family all the way to the semicolon, which is the end of the code. I'll right click and tell it to copy that. Go back into my studio code, and then I'm going to right click again and tell it to paste. So I did a big copy paste, and font family, you'll notice it's in a different color than the others. It's because it recognizes that this is an element, and then it has what we copied, Times New Roman. If I hover on top of font family, it will also tell me that it specifies a prioritized list of font family names or generic family names. So it gives me even more information about this code. Well, we don't want Times New Roman, we know that. So I'm going to highlight the words Times New Roman, and I'm going to type in Georgia, because that is the name of a very popular font. It's made by Microsoft. And everybody has access to it. Times, I'm going to keep it there because it's sort of still kind of generic and it may still be around. And if it doesn't find either one of these, it will just revert back to a serif, which is fine. After the semicolon, I'm going to click and press enter and move on to the next thing. And the next thing is going to be right here. Actually, I'm going to close this one so I don't have to follow it. Set the text color to black, and I have two notes here. One is it's black, and then it could be hashtag 000000. This is hexadecimal. It's the code. The computer knows that this is black. It knows that the word black is the black color. If I click on color, it'll tell me how it's coded. Text color takes a name like red. In our instance, it's going to be black, or a hex value, hashtag, and then the hexadecimal number, or an RGB value. We won't be using RGB for a while. Then it gives us a sample. Inside of the body, which is what we're trying to do, they say color colon blue semicolon. So we can copy that, take it back to Visual Studio and paste it. But rather than saying blue, and Visual Studio Code is nice enough to show me what blue looks like, I can say black. And now that's set. Before I go up any further, oh look at this, it's got a little color picker too. If I hover on top of black, I could pick another color. from this palette. It's very much like Photoshop. I wonder if it does that with Georgia. No, but it gives me more information. This is the Microsoft Developers Network reference. I won't click on that now. If you want to click on it and explore, by all means do. But before I go any further, let's see what this is looking like. So I've already made some changes, and you can tell by the notifications up here that this is happening. I'm going to press Command S, so you can also go to the File menu and save it. Control S on your PC, and it tells me that there's 2 files here that are ready to go. Do we want to message this to commit? I'm gonna say I'm gonna make the first CSS changes, and I'm going to click on the check mark to say that's right, and then I'm gonna click on this little menu, the 3 dots, and tell it to push, and then that way that's gonna go up to the server. I don't want to go and chase it right now because I have my Google Chrome open. CSS-Designer looks like this right now, but I made a couple of changes. And if I reload the page, you'll notice that the font changed. This is not Times New Roman anymore. Now this is Georgia. The color was already black, so we can't appreciate that right away. And why don't I do this just to show you that something really is happening? What if I said that the color was blue, like it suggested at first? I'm going to save it. I'm not going to push it. I'm just going to save it and come back here, reload it, and you'll notice that CSS now tells it that the text color, every text color and body should be blue. We don't want that. I'll show you later how it works so that you have a black text here and you have a blue text elsewhere if you want. So I'll black and move on after the semicolon, press enter, and go on to the next one. The next one is going to be a line height. I click on that to see what's going on. Line height property, it just specifies the height of a line. Currently in our document, these 2 lines are very close to each other. We want them to be a little bit further apart. Inside of the document, you'll notice that I have a note that it's changed it to 140%, EM 1.4. 140% is literally the percentage. It's just right now, whatever it is, increase it 140%, which is not necessarily twice as big plus 40%. It depends on how large your font already is, which then is why I might recommend that instead of a percentage, you might want to use an EM 1.4. And then that way it's just whatever your default font size is times 1.4. And they sort of tell you here, there's a lot of information about what line height does. The default value is normal, whatever your browser recognizes it. And then it'll say what the property values can be. Normal could be a number that will be multiplied with the current font size, and that's sort of like the EM that I was talking about, or the percentage. And so it's just whatever the current font size is, it will give you that percentage there. So in my code, before I do anything, I mean, I could type it, and why don't I do that? I was going to copy and paste, but I'll just go back to my Visual Studio Code and say that the line hyphen, and I can see a whole bunch of CSS that I can use, but I want to use line height. I just selected it, pressed enter, and I said I want it to be 1.4, and I can either type in the EM if I wanted to or not. I'll type it in and save it. Check it out on this other one, and I see that I have a little bit more space now. On to the next thing, and this is going to be margin. Set the margin to 30 pixels. I'll click on that, and margins are basically the spaces around the box. CSS basically is a box that holds all your elements in there, and the margin will then say, well, this is going to push things out of the way outside of the box, 100, or in this case, in the example, is 70 pixels. I don't want 70 pixels, I want something else. Know this is that whenever you do margin, I'm asking to be done all around. And I'm specifying this because you can say individual sides where margin top will say, okay, well, to the top, to the right, to the bottom, or to the left, in that order. And I'll tell you what that means in a second. But know that there's margin top, right, bottom, and left. But if you only say margin, then that's part of the shorthand, is that it will just do it all around. So if I go back over here to my Visual Studio, I can go to the next line and say set the margin to be whatever it was that we wanted it to be, which was 30 pixels all around. So margin is 30 pixels and semicolon. You'll notice that I put in a space after colons, and I put in so many spaces before the lines, and that's just a personal preference. This could all be smushed together, but this way it makes a little bit more sense, at least to me. You want to make your code readable for the next person that sees it. I will be that person here, and your real job, or in the real world, the next person to pick up the page to work on it, that's who it is. Going to reload, and you'll notice that the space around the body, which is here, increased from 0 to 30px. The next thing is the background image. And for this one, for sure, I'm going to say background image. I'm going to copy all this. And the background image is going to be the code background image, and then specifying URL. And then inside of there's going to be a parentheses and a quote that opens and closes. Inside of there, it's going to be whatever your file name is. In this case, they used an example called paper.gif. We already have ours called page-bg.gif. And I'll come back to that after I put in the code. Background image, URL paper.gif, and we said that this is called page-background.gif. Copy. And I'll replace that name with the file name that I just told you. I'm going to save this so that I can go and look at my Chrome and reopen it. And nothing happens because I forgot that actually, although we do have this file, it's not in the same directory as everything else is. And what I mean by that is that index and styles are in the same directory in week 4, but then we have this images folder. That's where the files are. So before I type in page, I need to say it's in images, and then slash. Inside of images, there's page-bg.gif, and it's already telling me that it knows that there's 4 files, and it's telling me what they're each called. This will come in real handy later. But for now, page.gif, I'm going to save and reload this. And I have a background image now. And little by little, this page is beginning to get some styling. I'm going to do another one of these points. It should not repeat the background image, and it should stay fixed. And these are kind of concepts that are maybe new to you, but they're not that out there. I'm going to click on do not repeat. Basically, it says background repeat. Right now, it would say repeat Y, and along the Y axis, the vertical axis, it would repeat the file for as long as there is a page. Up and down, if I say repeat X, it would repeat the image across the page, left or right, for as long as there is page. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to slide down a little bit more here, because somewhere in here it tells me that I can say background repeat X, but there's also a no repeat, which is something that we'll need in a second, because it tells us that we should not repeat, and then that it should stay fixed. So if I go back to my code, I will then press enter and paste what I just copied, and I know now that I don't want it to repeat along the y-axis. Instead, I want it to be a no repeat, and there's no hyphen repeat. I'll go on to the next one, and it says that it should stay fixed. And what this is, if you click on fixed, it's going to take you to the CSS background attachment property, which is basically the background repeat, no repeat that we saw just now, and then there's a background attachment that will specify it to be fixed. So this right here, I gotta copy and paste it inside of the code. So now the background attachment is fixed. The background attachment being that file. Images are fixed with regard to the viewport fixed, so that means that it's always going to be in the same place. I think we're almost done with the first batch of code. I'll go back and we're going to set the background color to this hexadecimal color. I'm going to double click the color F7 F3DE and copy it. I'm going to go to the background color up here, and it tells me that the background color property is the words background hyphen color quote and then the name of the color, or in this case the value that I just copied. On the right of every W3 Schools page there's a color picker, and then this will actually show you what all of these hexadecimal codes look like when they're in color, and it will allow you to pick them later on when that's what you're doing. In the meantime though, I'm going to go back to the Visual Studio Code, and I said that I wanted to specify the background color, so background hyphen color, and I'll type in, or just actually drop in, the hashtag F7 F3DE, and it's showing me what it looks like. It's this kind of a taupe, and I'm going to save this file, Command S, Control S on your PC. I'm going to make sure that it's committed by clicking on the check mark, and I'll say first block of CSS added. Press enter, and that accepted it. I'm going to then click on my little contextual menu here, the three dots, and tell it to push it. And it should be on its way up to the server. While that's happening, I'm going to go back to Chrome and reload this. So although we can't see it, the background color for this is a taupe. You'll notice that I'm scrolling up and down, and the file behind it, that background image, stays in the same place in a fixed position, which is something that we wanted to do. As we go along, we're going to be adding more CSS code so that these numbers to the side of the page 1 through 5 turns into a menu. We're going to be changing the color of some of these fonts. We're going to make it so that there's a difference between unvisited links and visited links. We're going to be getting rid of some of this underline, and we're going to be centering some text. We're going to be doing lots of stuff, and we'll be adding in a couple of images as well. In the end, this is going to be not quite a modern, progressive type of web page, but it's enough to get you going on CSS design. In the next video, we're going to tackle the following elements, which are going to be the page header ID inside of the H1 element. And that'll make sense a lot more when we get to it. In the meantime, let me check real quick just to see if my page has already made it up there. I'm going to type in my ID, which is itsc1401.github.io. I'm going to click on week 4, and sure enough, it's made it up there, and everything that's working locally is now also working on my GitHub page. So I'll see you in the next video.